To art historians, the work of Mikhail Vrubel represents an indicator of significant underlying cultural changes in 19th-century Russia. Nevertheless, these works were incomprehensible and mystifying to the contemporary Russian public, who was used to realistic tradition. Vrubel built his works on the long tradition of Orthodox Christian art and experimented with the aesthetics of symbolism and Art Nouveau. Assimilating different sources, the artist created a new visual language tailored to his inner vision. Known best for the repeating motif of demons, Mikhail Vrubel was one of the most prolific Russian artists at the turn of the 20th century, defining the path toward a new way of expression for younger artists. Mikhail Vrubel was born in Omsk, Siberia, on the 5th of March 1856 as the son of a military lawyer. From a young age, Mikhail was surrounded by books, and the household ambiance he grew up in was one of intellectualism. His father would actively encourage the learning of music and philosophy, hold regular visits to operas, and organize regular family evenings engaged in reading and debate. After finishing school, he followed in his father's footsteps and served in the army, engaging firsthand in the Caucasian and Crimean Wars. Going further, he wanted to become a military lawyer himself. During his military career, Vrubel's father recognized and encouraged his son's artistic talents, funding his artistic education through private tutors. After graduating law from St. Petersburg University in 1880, he officially entered the Imperial Academy of Arts, training under Pavel Chistyakov. From his early years, Vrubel was able to draw and model figures. During his education, this talent rapidly developed into an interest in various forms of visual expression. While other artists were busy capturing the world objectively, Vrubel used it to convey the subjective world. Individual European artists gradually accepted the idea of art as a vehicle to convey inner states and chose different pictorial languages. Vrubel, however, created his vocabulary by developing techniques he had learned in Chistyakov's drawing classes at the academy. Before drawing a subject, the students would break it into its essential planes. They would then soften the edges of the planes until the drawing approached a more traditional representation of the subject. Vrubel pushed this first rough stage to an extreme, creating a new visual vocabulary resembling Cézanne's style. In 1883, Vrubel was recommended to take part in the restoration of the Church of St. Cyril in Kiev, one of the city's most important medieval churches. During his stay in Kiev, he restored around 150 frescoes under the supervision of Professor Adrian Prakov. Next year, he traveled to Venice, where he was closely introduced to Byzantine and Renaissance art. The influence of the Byzantine mosaics, especially in the Church of St. Mark, together with medieval Russian art and its religious and spiritual heritage, defined the early development of Vrubel's art. After his work in the Church of St. Cyril was done, Vrubel struggled to find new work. After his unconventional designs for the newly built Cathedral of St. Vladimir were rejected in 1886, the artist fell into a religious and philosophical crisis. This crisis is sometimes considered a starting point of the artist's mental health deterioration. The parallels between Vrubel's desire to express the inner mood and long-lasting Byzantine tradition are explained in the Treatise on Images by John of Damascus. The 8th century theologian refers to Dionysius the Areopagite, who references the need to use symbols appealing to the senses, leading us to intellectual and spiritual conceptions. The Byzantine artists, wishing to convey a symbolic equivalent of a refined spiritual reality, created a decorative language of great beauty that emphasized the distance between this spiritual world and that of ordinary everyday reality. This new influence was accomplished by Vrubel in a series of studies for the mother and child in 1884. The decorative treatment of the drapery and the large expressive eyes and full lips, reminiscent of Novgorod icons and Italian mosaics, indicate the style Vrubel will develop throughout the next 20 years. In 1890, Vrubel relocated to Moscow as modern art trends spread throughout the city. This was when he got acquainted with the Art Nouveau movement, its sensibility for decorative art, and the use of modern materials. These new ideas pushed him towards artistic experimentation. In it, the artist fused his personal vision of the world with the traditional themes of Russian folklore, classical mythology, and literature. In his painting of Pan in 1899, Vrubel uses a mythological figure to convey his concept of the organic unity of man and nature. Unlike the god of classical mythology, Pan resembles the Leshy, the Russian forest spirit with a long beard. It is a strong, mischievous figure whose head reached the tops of the tallest trees. He would often lead travelers astray, but, being good-natured, would release them again. Pan is depicted here as a powerful creature, a patriarchal god of the forest. The twilight setting marks the awakening of mysterious forces in nature contained in the rich vegetation and its embodiment, the god Pan. Pan becomes symbolic of the wholeness of nature and its abundance. The symbolism is emphasized visually by his body, which appears to be growing out of a stump, and his curls and fingers resemble the knots and gnarls of an oak tree. The gentle light that softly shines on Pan and the white birches contribute to the mood of quiet mystery that Vrubel has tried to evoke. One of the last of his mythological paintings, The Swan Queen from 1900, encapsulates his idea of the metamorphosis of man and nature. The story was known best at the time from Tchaikovsky's ballet Swan Lake, first performed in 1877. At the end of the ballet, the prince is forced to choose between remaining alive in everyday reality or sacrificing himself in his love for the Swan Queen so that he may share her love in a spiritual world more beautiful than the other. The tinge of rose light playing on her wings and her elegant pearl and sapphire headdress convey the promise of beauty and tragedy, which his Russian audience knew was implicit in this tale. A vital motif Vrubel turned to throughout his life, sometimes considered the zenith of his oeuvre, was demons. Though these paintings are often erroneously related to the artist's deteriorating mental health, their source came from literature. The poem Demon, written by Mikhail Lermontov in 1841, is an epic poem featuring a fallen angel falling in love with a mortal princess. After she dies in his arms, the demon is doomed to suffer alone. For Vrubel, Lermontov's fictional demon showed potential in expressing universal concepts related to humanity's nature. The demon shows a conflicting ability to do both good and evil. He is humanized by his selfish passions, appetites, and cowardly refusals. Visual exploration of these universal inner conflicts and turmoil attracted Vrubel. In Demon Seated from 1890, the demon is stripped away from his identifying qualities, wings for example, to appear more human. We have a figure who exhibits an imposing but still human musculature, sitting with his knees pressed to his chest. It is a helpless and familiar pose of vulnerability. The demon sits alone, gazing to his right towards the gold of a sunset behind the mountain, while to his left are abstract flowers. A sense of anxiety is created through the tense interlocking of his fingers and the placement of his palms, which face outwards, pushing against the barrier of the picture plane. The horizontal format of the painting creates a great degree of imprisonment and claustrophobia, which is accentuated by the demon's hunched shoulders. His body is compressed into the shallow frame of the canvas. Vrubel's demon is an incarnated struggle of the mutinous human spirit in its quest for knowledge and the answers to life's doubts. In Demon Cast Down from 1902, the demon's contorted body takes the center and the biggest part of the composition. The demon's face and disfigured torso are the object of the viewer's attention. He is framed by an ominous landscape of the Caucasus, rendered in jagged purple and blue forms, topped with snow and whirling patterns that envelop his body. The demon once again has his arms crossed, but they rest on his head, acting as a barrier to the onslaught of his rejection and despair. The unusual proportions of the figure's body create the impression that his form is being manipulated by the powerful forces of nature surrounding him, which extend his limbs to unnatural lengths, dissolving his lower body. In Demon Cast Down, the sense of hopelessness and desperation of the previous painting is made more prominent. Before ending, other aspects of Vrubel's art should be mentioned. Though less known as a portrait painter, he did produce many during his lifetime. The obsessive innovator he was, Vrubel introduced a new concept of portraiture into Russian art. In his work, The Girl in Front of a Persian Rug, he departs from contemporary portraiture, whose aim was to produce a faithful psychological study. Instead, he creates an aesthetic idealization of the person portrayed. The figure becomes a means for creating a refined mood and atmosphere. Setting and dress are no longer metonymic devices used in the realist portrait to reflect the sitter's personality, but have been carefully selected by the artist to transform an everyday person into an idealized image. By setting a child who looks both delicate and sensitive amidst lilac, rose, emerald, and sapphire rugs, dressing her in a gown of rose-colored satin, hanging pearls around her neck, and putting a rose in her jewel-bedecked hand, Vrubel has created an Asian princess from the simple daughter of a Kiev banker. After the death of his infant son in 1902, Mikhail Vrubel's mental health deteriorated to the point of hospitalization. Nonetheless, he continued working even in the psychiatric clinic. Unfortunately, his physical health declined as well, and he lost his eyesight in 1906, after which he was forced to quit painting. Just 4 years later, Mikhail Vrubel, one of the most original Russian artists of the 19th century, passed away on the 14th of April 1910 at the age of 54. Mikhail Vrubel was one of the first artists in Russia to explore the Art Nouveau style and the concepts of symbolism in visual art. By reaching back into the past of Russian art, he used old techniques to create a new style that was concerned with the spiritual rather than the religious. Vrubel's idea that art cannot be limited to the canvas alone was held dear by the younger generation of Russian artists. Some younger artists indebted to his work were Pavel Filonov, Wassily Kandinsky, and Kazimir Malevich. His dense brushstrokes and breaking of figures led some art historians to cite Vrubel as a forerunner of Cubism. His painting Venice is often cited as an experiment with collage and cube-shaped forms. Russian artists who formed the Blue Rose group continued to practice many of Vrubel's concepts. They had all been liberated from an attitude that confined the artist to merely recording what was visible in the outside world, and Vrubel was a critical element in that liberation.